Being a programmer and I love tinkering, I have a problem. Oftentimes I see ideas or problems and also solutions, and I find tools or other people's versions of them, but I feel like, why would I pay for that? I can do the same thing myself, I can do it better, I can do it very easily, and most of the time I'm probably wrong. There's a reason why someone is charging money for it, because it actually brings benefit to someone else, and that benefit is worth more than the money that they spend. And for a lot of people, coding something themselves, for example, is not really a good use of their time, because they might want to not sit in front of a computer. But for someone like me, that situation is maybe a little bit of difference, because I actually enjoy that programming. I sometimes get really excited about a problem and I want to tackle it. I want to figure out how it works, if I can find a solution, and if I can make it work the way that I want the solution to work. Sometimes these projects end up in a multi-hour or sometimes even multi-day ordeal, and at the end of the day I just fold in the towel, or I throw in the towel and I give up, because my idea, my solution is actually not better, and I understand better that the solution that someone else is providing is actually pretty damn valuable. And more often than not, I actually ended up paying for a service, even if I started to program my own before. However, I don't think that that takes away any of the intriguingness of the problem, and also the whole process is still quite valuable. For me, for example, it's not only that I'm excited about it and I actually want to do something with it, I want to kind of like get my hands dirty and try something out, but it's also about understanding what is underneath. It started when I was really young, when I went to the trash place, basically, where like the recycling place where people brought old stuff. And one of those containers had old computers. And I grabbed computers with a friend of mine and we disassembled them, we put them back together, we saw what worked, what didn't work. Sometimes things got broken and sometimes we broke those things, but since it was already trash, so to speak, it didn't really matter. And it was incredibly interesting to figure all of those things out, and I wouldn't be where I am today if it weren't for that self-taught trying and just disassembling things and putting them back together. And the same thing works with software nowadays. Now, I don't want to give you a whole rundown of why I think all of these aspects are great and valuable. Maybe I will do that discussion in a different video, but today I want to talk about my latest project. And the whole thing is not necessarily my private idea that I came up with and nobody ever has thought of. It's something that other people already are solving, but I thought I will take it apart, look if I can find my own solution and make it even better for my own use case, for example. Now, the problem that I wanted to be solving was that I am now in my business doing more and more scheduling. I want to schedule podcast interviews with people. I want to schedule consulting calls, as well as free consultations and other things. And those scheduling mechanisms are more or less tedious because you always have to kind of figure out what time zones people are in, especially being a nomad and traveling around. That's always a big problem. But not only that, you also have this aspect of like, I suggest 3 days with certain time frames, and then the other person has to counter that process. And now there's way better ways with online scheduling where people can actually look at a website and they see my own schedule right there, and then they can pick a certain time frame out of that schedule. And obviously they don't see other people, like other appointments and stuff, but they see what type of event they want to do, what duration that the event should have, and then they can schedule that in my calendar and they will get an email invite through that as well. I'm not the first one to tackle this problem. Calendly, for example, is one of the solutions that I know very well, and I've also been using them. Calendly does pretty much all of these things that I'm asking for. They have different types of events that you can have with different durations. You can also connect it with your Google Calendar, so it takes into account if you already have other appointments in certain time frames. You can block out the morning and the evening, for example, that you're not working, or also you're not working on certain days in the week. And you can do all these things, and then you can send someone a link and they can pick their own time to be talking to you, for example, in an interview or something similar. Any kind of appointment, really. However, there's two things that I don't like about Calendly and also other solutions out there. Number one is that oftentimes they do more than I actually want them to do, and the design doesn't necessarily look the way that I want the design to look, the process of the date picking to be, stuff like that. I think oftentimes it might be able to be a little easier to kind of like go through that process, and it could also be more customized. But the bigger problem for my own liking is that specifically with Calendly, for example, they are free for up to one event. And I think that one event is really, like, it can work if I do a generic kind of like catch-all event, but it's kind of tedious. Like, an interview is 90 minutes, a free consult is 20 minutes, something else is maybe 30 or 40 or maybe an hour. So like having different types of event is really helpful to be able to schedule much more productively, but that only becomes available after you pay the membership fee or the product fee, which in this case is $8. And I'm sorry, but $8 for a product that is just there for scheduling events. And in my case, it's not something that is like I'm scheduling every single day or every hour of my day through that tool. Like $8 a month, and that's only if you pay the yearly. So it's like 96 a year. I consider that a lot, and comparing that especially to something like, for example, Google Apps for Work, where for $8 you get email, calendar, Google Drive, you get a terabyte of storage and stuff like that. I don't see the relation between the product and the value. Other people might disagree, and they think that that's the best tool out there, and they're happily paying those $8. I think nowadays we are in a world where if I run a business and I pay for all of the services out there, I might end up with Toggle, Google Drive, I go with Calendly, and like 5 other services, and maybe also the Adobe Creative Cloud that I'm paying for already. If I do all of that, then I'm gonna have expenses that are not reasonable compared to what I'm actually doing and what those tools are bringing as a benefit. So I actually decided to step in the ring and find my own solution and program something that I can use for myself. And while I was exploring that idea more and more, I thought to myself, do I really want to do this? Is $8 really that bad? Maybe I can just do with one event type at all and completely go around writing my own solution and paying for any of the services. But in the end, I kind of like had this thought that not only would I make my own solution, I also wanted to share this with you on my YouTube channel here. And I'm also considering to, if there is something to come out of this project, to open source the whole thing. And I think that's really exciting because I want to kind of like inspire other people to look at problems that are out there and look if they can make their own solution for something. Use the tools that are available, and specifically with programming, for example, it's literally a laptop and an internet connection and you are off to the races. You can program pretty much anything, and there's servers online, there's just-in-time deploy and stuff like that. Everything is relatively cheap, and starting something is really, really easy. Even the resources to learn how to do all of these things are out there. And I'm gonna make a video about that specifically as well, on like how to learn things online, because there's so many ways you can further yourself, and by also doing that, you're also furthering everybody else with you. And there's place for more innovation. And there's obviously also a place for price competition. There's always people that prefer a Mac over a Linux machine, but still there's an open source version of a program that's out there that prevails in certain aspects. And maybe this open source version of something might do the same. But for now, I'm gonna keep the project small. I'm not gonna open source it as of this right now, because I just need the first to get some basics going to begin with. But once the whole thing is going a little bit, I think that the code will be on GitHub as well. But now, what about this project? Okay, like how far am I in this? I had the idea over the weekend, basically. On Saturday night, I was like, okay, I want to schedule more podcasts. I want to schedule more things. What do I need to get this done? And one of those aspects is, okay, how do I make it easy for myself, but also for the other person to be able to do that? And that's when I looked into Calendly and I decided that this would be a nice idea to actually do something by myself. Next morning hits, I actually was so excited to start coding that I jumped right in and I did something. And the things that I immediately tried out was that with the programming language and the environment that I'm using, which is Node.js, I tried on how can I list all of the events out of a certain Google Calendar? How can I talk to the API from Google to even be able to do that? And then also, how can I create an event with an attendee that both of these people, so it's like the host, which is me, as well as the other person will get an email. And so I wrote a couple of test lines, basically, literally like two files, just to kind of like run them in the terminal and see if with certain predefined values, I can even get the data and put it into the calendar from Google itself. Those were pretty much working after about 2 hours or something like that. So that was already a big success. Those things were relatively easy, but that's often the case with programming something or trying to figure out a little project. Getting into the weeds and trying to first and foremost test a couple of things is super, super simple. Putting everything together is a whole different ballgame. So I had to step back a little bit and think about the process of what will the person on the website actually go through. And with that, I can also then try to figure out, okay, how can I accomplish certain things? How can I get a certain data set? How can I display it? How can I make the user interact with it to, at the end, reach the end result of a date in the calendar, which does not overlap with anything, which is sending out emails and doing all these things very, very easily. So I sat down and created a little bit of a list for myself as to what do I have to work through to figure out how this is going to work. The first thought that I had was, okay, this is going to be a website. It's either going to be a subdomain, it's going to be its own product, so its own website, or it's going to be something on a folder that's like under a certain folder on my domain, for example, chrisspiegl.com/schedule or something like that. On that site, a user should be able to choose between the different types of event that someone wants to schedule. So, for example, in my case, a podcast interview that is 90 minutes, a consultation session with 60 minutes, and a free consultation, which is 20 minutes. Those things should be visible there, but I also want to be able to send a link out to a person, for example, chrisspiegl.com/schedule/podcast, and then the person immediately goes to the site where they can choose a day and date, or like the time slot for that. Which brings me to the next point, that after selecting a event type, I want the user to see certain days and time slots. These time slots are essentially the beginning times of the event, which is in 15-minute increments throughout the day. However, I don't want to work before 8 in the morning, let's say, and also I don't want to work after 10 at night. So I needed to take the tool and make only those work blocks available. But next I needed the events from Google, which I already tried before how it works, to kind of like import those and reduce the blocks that are available by the time of all of the events that are in the calendar. And after that, I take into account also that the event itself has about, for example, 60 minutes of a duration, but I also want a buffer zone before and after the event, let's say 15 minutes. So the total time that needs to be available in a certain time block that a user can use, it actually needs to be at least 1.5 hours for a 60-minute event with 15 minutes before and after. All of these things taken into consideration, I need to basically create an array of all these available time blocks that are in 15-minute increments and figure out a way how to do that. Once all of those things are calculated, I want to display all of the days and their specific times underneath each other so the user can see all the days that are available from 24 hours in the future until 14 days in the future, so maximum 14 days in advance, but that's obviously something that I want to also be able to adjust. It's just a setting that I want to use for the moment. So it's easier to have a state that is defined, which is in this case 24 hours in the future and maximum of 14 days. Once all of this information is on the website, I want the user to be able to select one of the time slots. So once the user has selected a time out of the list of available blocks, they're also asked for their name and email address, and then they click submit. The user then gets redirected to a page that congratulates them because they have a scheduled event. And from there, the event gets put into my calendar. I am supposed to get an email because I'm the host, but I also need to confirm that that actually will work. And the guest gets an email from Google Calendar as well, again, confirming that they actually want to use that event and also put it in their calendar that way. All of this, of course, should be time zone sensitive, so the user's browser time zone should be the one that is used to display all the times, but eventually the user should be able to change the time zone as well, so they can adjust it if that's displayed the wrong way for whatever reason. So after having all these considerations and making all this like planning, I was done for the time. It was lunchtime and I was kind of like finished for now. Later in the day, I actually continued on this project, but I think this is a great point to cut this video into pieces and make a second part of this, and probably also a third and fourth, to kind of like continue this exploration of making my own solution to this problem and on showing you how you can make something yourself without a lot of funding or tools or anything. You can literally start from scratch, right? Like with a computer, you already have it probably in your hands, or you have a phone or something. Even there, you sometimes can code nowadays with certain programs. After I was done doing this like groundwork, I had lunch, and after that, I got more coding done. And to kind of like give you a hint at what also came from the future was like a first prototype within the first 10 hours. And by now I also have a little bit of a name, which you will find somewhere in the description. I will mention it already, but it's not going to be all too loud yet, but it will be something that I'm gonna put on its own domain so people can use it eventually as well. But that's a long way from where I am right now. It's definitely in the baby stage right now, and this whole process is just for inspiration purposes. It's to inspire people that their tools are out there. You can do something as well. You don't always have to use the solutions other people make. It's out there. You have the power in you. You can learn something new, and maybe you build the next Instagram eventually. That's a long and far stretch, of course, but it's out there, the possibilities are out there, and you just have to get started. To give you a little bit of a preview of what I was thinking in terms of making this a series, in the next few videos I'm thinking to, for one, look in the code more that I have already written, the kind of like the test runs to kind of like get the data from Google, put it into Google and that kind of stuff, to share a little more about that, as well as where the software is in terms of like after 10 hours, where I got it to work, to go through the whole step-by-step process and kind of like see where the name comes into play, how to come up with a name, how to like set it all up, and eventually I also think about how to put it on GitHub and how to manage this whole thing as an open source project. And eventually I want to also get your incorporation in the comments, to have suggestions, to have feature ideas, to have maybe solutions to certain problems, and the whole thing becoming an open source project. Maybe you even become a co-coder in the whole thing, and you can run your own instance of it eventually as well. I know this is all a lot, and it's not something that is just something you start out right off the bat with the first thing ever when you learn how to code, but I think it's a great start to kind of understand that you have the power, you can do these things, and you just need to get started. So with that said, I am gonna keep working on everything that I'm doing right now, and I will see you in the next one. Go make something, and bye.